welcome. This is Expose on One TV network. I am Flora Duke. On the show today, we expose you to Russian-Ukraine war versus inflation rate currently affecting most countries in the world, which will streamline it to Nigerian economy. We begin with the definition of inflation as regards economy. It may be one of the most familiar words in economies. Inflation has plunged countries into a long period of instability. Central bankers often aspire to be known as inflation hawks. Politicians have won elections with promises to combat inflation, only to lose power after failing to do so. Inflation was even declared public enemy number one in the United States by Eastwell President Gerald Ford in 1974. What then is inflation? Why is it so important as regards today's series of Expose? We'll move on. Inflation is a rate of increase in prices over a given period of time. Inflation is typically a broad measure, such as the overall increase in prices or the increase in the cost of living in a country. But it can also be more narrowly calculated for certain goods such as food, or for services such as airports, for example. Whatever the context, inflation represents how much expensive the relevant set of goods and services has become over a certain period, most commonly a year. Putting aside the very real human cost, war has also caused serious economic damage to infrastructure, a decline in the working population, inflation, shortages, uncertainty, a rise in debt, and disruption of normal economic activity. Since the last few months, both print and electronic media all over the world had started to speculate about every likelihood of Russian aggression taking place in Ukraine. The United States US also started to convey the invasion of Ukraine by Russia was imminent. Thus, the administration of US President Joe Biden began insisting its threat of severe economic consequence would deter Russia from invading Ukraine. But the obvious is here. Economic dwindling. Earlier this year, during President Biden's meeting with German Chancellor, the US and its allies were seen stressing that they were united on the consequences should Russia actually invade Ukraine. However, there was also a huge feeling that Russia may not invade Ukraine, looking at the economic consequence, looking at the human consequence, and of course prevailing that anti-US and UK internal policies of the European Union, as well as its symbolic relationship with Russia, may undercut this proclaimed solidarity. Number of Central European countries, and Germany in particular, who are largely dependent on Russia for its cheap energy needs and in turn competitive manufacturing export, could, though silently, be reluctant to decide with US sanction on Russia. The reality is glaring. The speculations, the predictions, the permutation, but here we are with the reality. The war is on non-stop. A sketchy impact of the war revealed by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights verified a total of 3,942 civilian deaths during Russian military attack on Ukraine as of May 23, 2022, and 258 were children. Furthermore, 4,591 people were reported to have been injured, property running into billions of dollars destroyed. However, the Human rights organizations specified that the real numbers could be higher. The war has added to mounting concerns of sharp global slowdown, surging inflation and debt, a spike in poverty levels. The economic impact has reverberated through multiple channels, including commodity and financial market, trade and migration links, and adverse impact on confidence. The war is also hitting hard on the emerging and developing economies of Europe and Central Asia, a region that was already heading for economic slowdown this year from the ongoing effect of the pandemic. In addition to the Russian, Ukraine, Belarus, Greece, Republic, Moldova, and Tajikistan are projected to fall into recession this year, while growing growth projections have been downgraded in all economies due to spillovers from the war. Weaker than expected growth in the euro area and the commodity trade and financing shock Russia and Ukraine account for about 40% of wheat imports into the region and about 75% or more in the Central Asian and the South Caucasus. Russia is also a major export destination for many countries, while remittances from Russia are close to 30% of the GDP in some Central Asian economies. The Ukraine war and the pandemic have once again shown that crises can cause widespread economic damage and set back years of per capita income and development gains. According to the International Monetary Fund, that both Russia and Ukraine are major commodity producers, and disruption there have resulted in soaring global prices, especially that of oil and natural gas, which Ukraine and Russia are accounting for up to 30% of the global export for wheat. Food prices too have jumped. The IMF added that the entire global economy would feel the effect with a slower growth and faster inflation. What does the World Bank has to say about this? The World Bank also said in its 2022 Spring Economic Update for Europe and Central Asia that the conflict delivered a major shock to the global economy in 2 years and caused a humanitarian catastrophe. World Bank said, I quote, "Even prior to the war, the global recovery had already been decelerating alongside intensifying geopolitical tensions, continued COVID-19 flare-ups, diminishing macroeconomic support, and lingering supply bottlenecks." It's noted. Now let's talk about this impact of the war, on food supply chain. The World Bank's baseline projection assumes Ukraine's poverty based on the $5.50 per day threshold rate will increase from 1.8% in 2021 to 19.8% in 2022. It's added that models developed from the United Nations suggested that a more severe and protracted war could lead to poverty affecting nearly 30% of the population. Quoting estimates from authors of the Center for Global Development blog, the World Bank said the latest surge in food prices could push an additional 40 million people under the $1.90 per day poverty line. You know, this is the current situation in Nigeria. Quite shocking, quite sad one. 90% of the population in Nigeria live below the poverty line of $1.90 per day. IMF also echoed similar concern. It said in March that steeper price increases for food and fuel must pose a greater risk of unrest in some regions, Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America to the Caucasus, and Central Asia. While food insecurity is likely to further increase in parts of Africa and the Middle East, the war disrupted Ukraine planting and harvest season, destroyed critical feeds, stores, infrastructure, and production, especially in eastern Ukraine. Moreover, the conflict has resulted in shipping being halted. Things are not being shipped into the country. Nothing is coming in from Ukraine, and nothing is going out from Ukraine. Same with Russia. Nothing is leaving Russia, not to forget their biggest ship was bombed recently during the war. We're asking on his policy, what has the Nigerian government done? As the nation solely depend on wheat from these two countries, commodities that depend on wheat such as raw material has skyrocketed. Examples are noodles, biscuits, cakes, flakes, cereals, bread prices has rose up to 3 times in the space of 4 months. Who bears the biggest brunt? The average Nigerian man, who must feed his children tea and bread before they jet for school, noodles and eggs as lunch with off. African American government speculations of the impact of this conflict. Were there proactive measures? The answer is as good as you think. No, no proactive measures. The world is currently feeling a heat on wheat imports as Russia and Ukraine, which account for over 30% wheat export, have been in face-off for nearly 1 month. A statement credited to the CBN governor reads, CBN has commissioned 4 seeds company to process 25,000 metric tons for the next planting season. This strategy, he said, sought to reduce wheat importation by 60% in 2 years and eliminate wheat importation over the long term. Really? He said. The bank had also facilitated and financed a seed multiplication programs that would help to sustain the propagation of the seeds and guarantee the availability of high-yielding seeds. According to the CBN boss, the bank's collaboration with Flour Mills of Nigeria identified, validated and cultivated demonstration farms to holistically showcase the improved protocol for wheat farming in Nigeria and the impact of GAP on high yields to farmers. He went on to explain that apart from the Anchor Borrowers program of the bank, the CBN Bank this time around, which has led to a total disbursement of over 975.6 billion naira. Please take note of this figure. These are amounts that has been disbursed. 975.6 billion naira to over 4.52 million smallholder farmers cultivating 21 agricultural commodities across the country. The bank had other interventions targeted at addressing the financing needs of specific nodes of the agricultural value chain. He added that to ensure access to finance, especially to businesses that have the potential to drive economic growth, promote diversification and improve productivity, the CBN recently introduced the 100 for 100 policy on production and productivity. The governor added that so far the CBN had disbursed 29.51 billion naira to 31 projects, with 13 of them in agriculture. Like, seriously? You currently watching this video and watching Expose on One TV network. Can you feel the impact of this fund disbursing to the agro sector? We're talking about a whopping sum of 975.6 billion naira and 29.51 billion on all agro sector to boost wheat production by way of extension, reducing importation, and yet inflation rate is still high on wheat. Like, seriously? Let's even address the other 21 agricultural commodity the governor said talked about. Which agro-commodity is currently affordable in Nigeria? Can you afford a bunch of plantain currently being sold for 8,000 to 10,000 for a bunch? Or a tuber of yam being sold for 2,000 to 5? Is it grains you want to talk about? What proactive measures, and of course the fund, was it misappropriated or there was no proactive measure in place? Russian is a major exporter of food products, and one of which includes durum wheat, a food item particularly imported by Nigeria and has recorded unprecedented rise since the invasion started. The price of wheat rose to its highest level in the past weeks following Russian-Ukraine war. Meanwhile, Nigeria is a major importer of wheat products, being the third most widely consumed grain in the country. A glance into the data from the NBS shows that Nigeria imported durum wheat worth over 128.1 billion in 9 months period of 2021. While it recorded a 144.1 billion naira import in the full year of 2020. Nigeria is already battling with high inflationary pressure and food supply chain disruption. The surge in commodity prices further puts a strain on the local market since Nigeria largely depends on importation to meet local demands. The price of rice has risen to over 34,000 per 50 kg bag. Sachet water now selling for 20 naira. Nigeria currently spends over 50% of its expenditure on feeding. And with food prices rising at an unprecedented level, it only means disruption for Nigerian purchasing power. Nigeria, as an importer of refined petroleum products, is bearing the brunt of the surge in the crude oil market, as the price of diesel, which is not a subsidized product in the country, has skyrocketed to over 850 naira per litre, with some stations already selling above 600 naira. The surge in the landed cost of refined products and the increase in demand for diesel and the local market forced by the recent epileptic power supply across the country has driven the upsurge witnessed on the price of diesel. As the cost of operation will also record in the uptick since most organizations make use of generators for their businesses, including One TV network. Thrive on generating said petrol day in, day out. No thanks to the importation of bad petrol into the country that damaged the cars of innocent Nigerians. As we speak, none has been sanctioned for that misdemeanor, exposing the country to the possibility of further devaluation. It would be undesirable if a crunch in FS supply reserves the positive record in both the current account and international trade balance. It is also worth pointing out that Nigerian youths in the country are currently staying at home due to the month-long ASUU strike and are now joined by thousands of Nigerians who will not be able to return back to Russia for their academics due to the war, due to the unrest. You may want to ask, what is One TV Network exposing on this series? The significant increase in the cost of transportation, food items, and other necessity in Nigeria indicates a continuous dent in the purchasing power of average Nigerians. This could in turn reverse the movement of Nigerians' consumer price index. You will recall that Nigeria's inflation rate dropped to 15.6% in January 2022 and food inflation to 17.13% from 17.37% recorded in previous months. However, with a sudden spike in the cost of basic items, the country bears the risk of experiencing another uptick in inflation numbers. Another uptick in inflation numbers if an urgent measure is not taken as we speak. If an urgent step is not drastically deployed into the economy to caution the inflation rate in the country, if an urgent step is not taken urgently to address the issue of forests. We literally import everything. Everything we import. Even with the war, Nigeria is not thinking of how to, from cassava flour to get wheat. Nobody is thinking in that dimension. And we keep hearing the CBN telling us they channel huge amount into the agro sector. Where is the resultant effect? What is the impact? Where are the impacts? No one is talking about it. We only see figures, logos, numbers without effects. One TV Network is saying, wake up Nigerian leaders. Leaders at all levels, wake up and do the needful before this nation crumble. Someone once said Nigeria is a sinking ship. I don't want to believe that. Something can still be done. Wake up the government of Nigeria. Wake up, invest into agriculture. If the CBN is saying they're investing into agriculture, let's see the impact. Let's see the genuineness. Let those who need this fund, those who are into real-time agriculture, be given this fund. And they should be closely monitored, under close scrutiny. Let's see the youths given opportunity to delve into agriculture. Let's see the impact. Wake up, Nigerian youth, as the key to changing this narrative lies in your hands. I am Flora Duke. Many thanks for watching. The change we require in this country begins with you and I. Like our page, share this video, visit the comment column, drop your comments, and let's talk more. Bye for now.